Hi, this is Steve at blessedhope2018.com. Let's transport ourselves over to the Middle Eastern coast of Palestine, to the city of Tyre. Now, I know that there's many that really don't realize that with a close investigation of the text and history, Ezekiel 26 is actually a proof text for the inerrancy and supernatural origin of the Bible, as well as proof that what God said would come to pass will. I know most are aware of Ezekiel's prophecies concerning Gog and Magog, the massive future invasion of Israel by the armed forces of the Antichrist, and then the nations again at the end of the millennium when Satan is loosed or set free from his prison. But make no mistake about it, nothing compares to just a implicit trust in the God of Scripture. Blessed are those who believe and don't see. I mean, faith doesn't need any external evidence to confirm anything, but sometimes it's nice to get somewhat of a visual to help put all that into perspective and add weight to that implicit trust. And I hope to do that with you on this video. It might just help those who are not so steady in the faith to believe that God can be trusted to do without question what he says he's going to do. And Tyre is just but one of many archaeological proofs, but one of the most interesting, I believe. Now, Tyre was an ancient city that became the leading city of Phoenicia. The city was located in the plain of Tyre, a small region about 15 miles long from north to south and about 2 miles deep at most inland on the northwestern Mediterranean coast adjacent to Canaan. It's about 20 kilometers north of Israel. Actually, Tyre was two communities. One was on the coast and another was on an island about a half mile off the coast. A half a mile. Except, well, it's no longer an island, but a peninsula. It's how it became a peninsula that grabbed my interest. I thought if I could share with you folks how this came to be, it might make Ezekiel's prophecies regarding events in the future all the more real, because the fulfillment of Ezekiel's prophecies with reference to Tyre is a stunning chapter in ancient history. So we'll look at the players and the geography of this prophecy. Jeremiah and Nebuchadnezzar, they also played a role in Tyre's destruction, but for the sake of time, I'm going to focus on Ezekiel's prophecy, which foretold its complete destruction, and the unique way that it came about through Alexander the Great. He doing what Nebuchadnezzar failed in doing. I looked it up. I saw that Ezekiel, he's born in 622 BC. He sees his first visions, and he's placed into the office of a prophet by God in 593. Ezekiel chapters 1 through 3. The Tyre prophecy was 588 BC, 5 years later. I believe 1878 years from the prophecy to its fulfillment in 1291 AD. Complete fulfillment in 1291 AD. Now there's this guy named Hiram. He was an ally of the Israelite kings David and Solomon. He had pretty friendly relations with Israel. He supplied Solomon with men and materials for the construction of the temple at Jerusalem, and he cooperated with him in Mediterranean and Red Sea trading voyages. Solomon gave him tribute, and he gave him Galilean territory in return. After David had conquered Jerusalem, Hiram he sent him cedar wood and carpenters and masons so that he might build a house. 2 Samuel verse 11. Hiram was a friend of David throughout David's life, and after David's death, he continued on terms of friendship with Solomon. He supplied Solomon with cedar trees, fir trees, and construction laborers for the building of the temple, and Solomon repaid him with wheat and olive oil, We read about that in 2 Chronicles. Now, 20 years later, Hiram sent to Solomon gold and another large supply of cedar and fir trees, and Solomon gave him in return a present of a gift of 20 towns in Galilee. Ezekiel's prophecy was a result of Hiram exalting himself to the status of a god and manifesting his arrogance in a seemingly unrestrained fashion amidst the riches that he had accumulated. Long story short is that it eventually comes about that Alexander realized that somehow he must achieve mastery of the city. Tyre's hope of victory was grounded in the fact that the island city was well fortified, and Alexander, he didn't have a navy. Tyre was now a fortified island which could be captured only with the assistance of a fleet of ships, and with no fleet of his own and no possibility of capturing theirs, and with a greater determination than ever to subdue the city, Alexander the Great at once set about entering the city by the only other means available to him, namely the construction of a causeway from the shore to the island. Now, I was in the Navy, and I can tell you that what Alexander and his men did would have made the Seabees mighty proud. So here's Alexander without any ships to bridge the distance, and so how does he go about this? Well, to be fair, a half-mile long sandbar, I guess you could call it, linked the ancient Lebanese island of Tyre to the mainland. And so he used the natural sandbar to build a causeway. But it turns out that materials to do that were in abundance, because spread along the shore facing toward the island were the ruined houses and the palaces and the temples and the theaters of the old city, which had been brought into ruin by Nebuchadnezzar. But it wasn't an easy task. So great was the need for materials that the soldiers dragged timbers, columns, pieces of statues, basically everything that they could get their hands on, to cast into the sea. At one point, a great storm rose up, and it washed part of it away, much to the comfort of the Tyrians, who must have been assured that God was on their side. But the damage was repaired, and the causeway was completed after 7 months of diligent toil, in which even the very dust of the city was scraped from the shore and thrown into the sea, the distance of about a half a mile. Now, it may not seem that far until you stand beside the seashore and you look out a half a mile out to sea. And it was about 200 feet wide, about 65 yards wide, to accommodate as war machines to be used in battering down the eastern wall, protecting the city. So, in 332 BC, Alexander, who strangely died at age 32, I found that interesting, he entered the island city and he forever destroyed Tyre. 8,000 Tyrians fell fighting along the walls, and another 2,000 were crucified around the city by Alexander's soldiers. Women and children were sold as slaves. At least 30,000 from what I've learned. Alexander lost maybe something like 400 men is all. He was able to secure ships from Sidon, Cyprus, some of his Greek allies. So attacking from the east by land and the west by sea, Alexander the Great finally took Tyre. He achieved in 7 months what Nebuchadnezzar was unable to accomplish in 13 years. Tyre revived once more for a while. It recovered some of its former prosperity, but little by little, a long, slow decay set in until in modern times the population has dwindled to just a few thousand. Our Lord, he visited the region, Matthew chapter 15, Mark chapter 7, and the people from the region occasionally sat under his ministry. Since those days, the island fortress passed from the hands of Muslim to Crusader and back into Muslim hands, but as a city of commerce, it slowly passed into oblivion. So such is the story of Tyre. What was once an island is now a peninsula the original causeway having served to trap drifting sand and debris, thereby widening the connection with the shore. And today, fishermen spread their nets on the proud ruins of Tyre, which barely rises above the waves. So the prophecy of Ezekiel was fulfilled. With our own eyes and Google Earth and reliable historical records, we have absolutely no excuse for not believing the prophecies of Ezekiel, as well as other prophets of God, that they won't be fulfilled precisely as God said they would. The island city does not exist today. It sank below the surface of the Med. All that remains of it is a series of black reefs offshore, which couldn't have been there in the first and the second millennia BC because they posed such a threat to navigation. The peninsula that now juts out from the coastline was probably washed up along the barrier of Alexander's Causeway, but the island itself broke off and it sank away when the gradual caving in or the sinking took place. The old Tyre, the real Tyre, is nothing but a memory. The modern Tyre bears no relation to the ancient city that fell under the curse of God. Ezekiel's prophecies of chapters 38 and 39 foretelling the destruction of Jerusalem was given him by God in 588 BC when he was 34 years old. He was born in 622. So you had better believe that what God has said will come to pass will. 1878 years from when Ezekiel prophesied against Tyre to its complete destruction, or to its complete fulfillment in 1291 AD. So a close reading of the text of Ezekiel 26 reveals that the rubble from Tyre would be put into the sea. This was fulfilled in 332 BC by Alexander the Great's army, 256 years after Ezekiel was written. The passage does not state that Nebuchadnezzar would capture the island city and get its wealth. On the other hand, it doesn't say that Nebuchadnezzar would not conquer Tyre at all. He conquered old Tyre. It simply states that he didn't get anything of value from it. And this is exactly what Ezekiel 29:17 says. The total destruction of Tyre would be accomplished gradually by one nation after another. And in the end, it would be destroyed down to the bare rock and it would never be rebuilt. The final destruction took place in AD 1291, almost 2,000 years after Ezekiel was written. Tyre was attacked by a succession of nations over time, and since the days of Nebuchadnezzar, Tyre has been conquered or ruled over by the Greeks, the Persians, the Romans, the Crusaders, and the Arabs who destroyed the city again in 1291. So when God tears something up, he does it right. And this in contrast to Damascus, which will be destroyed in one day. Archaeologists have not unearthed the great buildings of Ezekiel's day. These great structures, such as the palace and the temple of Hercules, are yet to be found. Alexander's Operation CB, as I've come to call it, it interrupted the water currents, and some of the structures from that mole are now underwater. When excavations are undertaken, it's as if the Tyre of Ezekiel's day never existed at all. It's just gone. It's gone. Just as God said it would be. What I find utterly amazing is how all of this evidence lies right smack dab in the laps of the skeptics, the atheists, the agnostics, right before the eyes of a disbelieving, uncaring world that's determined to plot its own course as it regards human history, ignoring the monumental evidence that he's given to validate his word. If you don't know Jesus Christ, you need to know that time is short. History teaches us a lot of things, but what I believe it teaches us most of all is how fortresses and monuments and cities and cultures and peoples come and go. I believe the reason that we were given the ability to look back into the past is so that we can gain a greater sense of just how fragile and fleeting our existence is here below. James described it as a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. This is Steve. I love you all. I truly do. Thanks for watching.